OPIUM by Harlan Ellison. This, one of the author's bookshop window stories, written literally from inside a bookshop window and based upon a prompt handed to him the minute he begins writing, was first published in the February 1978 issue of Shayol Science Fiction magazine and republished in two collections of his short stories, Shatterday in 1980 and Ellison Under Glass, Stories Written in Windows in 2019. Read by Darrell T. Smith II for my channel, Quasar Spectra. Introduction by the author. This one was written to be read on television. I've done so on two occasions. First, on an NBC interview show called At One with the estimable Keith Berwick as host. The second time, I read it over the Canadian Broadcasting Company during the 90 Minutes live show, then hosted by Peter Gazowski, bringing the spoken word to the tube-enslaved masses. No, I'm not going to enter another crazed screed against television and its manifest horrors. Consult my last book for everything I care to say on that dreary topic. Then why does he tell us all this? I tell you all this because opium was intended as a bit of guerrilla warfare. It is a story that says only one thing. We are entertaining ourselves into oblivion. I can't stand it, we say. I work my ass off all day, and I just want to get away from it all, we say. I don't want any heavy stuff. I just want to be entertained, we say. And so we spend the major part of our non-working hours escaping the real world, the pragmatic universe, if you will. Whether it be fast sex, fundamentalist religion, cheap novels, empty-headed movies, booze, dope, sword and sorcery fantasy, endless television watching, fast food, or miniature golf, we run from dealings with the real world like ants from raid. So I wrote this story to say that entropy tries to maintain the status quo in order to keep the system working, and that permits of very little outlawry, very little berserk behavior, and from the desperados, whether they be Einstein or Elizabeth Cady Stanton, come the strength and the upheaval that moves the world forward toward light and reason. And the opium of the people, as Marx called religion, has changed through the centuries. Now it's all the elements noted above that keep people distracted and dumb, and that includes the deification of sports. Quoting from another great philosopher, Howard Cosell, who said, quote, "Sports are the toy department of life, the primary means for sustaining delusion and illusion," end quote. This story, intended as fifth column warfare against the medium of television, to be read on television, says simply that if the real world isn't interesting enough to command the attention of the lives it contains, then maybe the real world will alter itself magically to keep us away from Taco Bell and Laverne and Shirley. This moment of softness has been brought to you by Z Toilet Tissue. Opium. Anne-Marie Stepner placed the tip of the double-edged razor blade against her left wrist, just below the place in her palm where the lifeline turned toward the thumb on the Mount of Venus. At the precise spot where the lifeline ended, she slid the blade into the skin and began drawing it deeply down the length of her arm toward the inside of her elbow. She had heard that if one really wanted to slash her wrists, she should open the arm lengthwise, not across the veins. It was too easy for them to hold it together and tape it up if one cut across. Up the arms was the way to do it if one was serious about suicide. A file clerk in a large recording company, what blind dates would call really plain, but does it like a rabbit. 31 years old, without even the usual range of dull prospects, she had wakened several hours earlier to find the grad student she had met at the party last night already cleared out. He had not, thoughtfully, used her lipstick to write his name and phone number on the bathroom mirror, but he had left a pile of wet towels, corpse-like, draped over the tub. She was quite serious about the double-edged razor blade. As she pulled the blade up her arm, encountering only minor resistance, she looked out the front window of her duplex. On the front lawn, at least 5 of the 7 dwarves were planting a beautiful bonsai tree. She smiled at the way they worked so industriously, scooping out the dirt and placing it neatly on a tarpaulin, how Grumpy removed the wrappings around the roots, and how Dopey clapped his hands as the hole was dug. She knew she was hallucinating, possibly shock, probably from loss of blood, but she felt she would like to go out there to die, out where the sun was shining. It had not been shining when she'd crawled out of bed. In fact, it had been raining. She walked to the door, leaving dark stains on the cheap carpet, and opened the door to the front yard. The razor blade lay on the coffee table. If necessary, she could do the other arm later. She didn't think it would be necessary. As she approached them, they looked up at her. "Good morning," Doc said, giving her a big smile. "Do you like it? I think it's about 100 years old." "It's really lovely," Anne-Marie said. "But why are you planting it here on Sunday morning?" Bashful came up to her and took her by her right arm, the arm that was not bleeding. "Brightening up the real world for you, Miss Stepner," he said. She was startled. She could feel his tiny hand in hers. She could smell the faint, not unpleasant odor of their work sweat. She could hear the ratchety sound of their spades in the dirt. Was this the way it was when one was on the way out? She was led by the dwarf to a place right beside the bonsai, which Sleepy and Grumpy had put in the hole. Dopey was packing in the earth around the hole. She reached out and touched the tree. It was real. "Have a nice day," Doc said, and began gathering up the planting tools. "You've wasted your time," she said. "I'm dying. Can't you see that?" One by one they came to her and hugged her as she sat there, and then they went away. In a few moments, with the intricate hieroglyphics of the bonsai's branches before her eyes, she felt faint, lay back, and became unconscious. She sat up in the hospital bed, her arm taped to the elbow, and listened to the young intern. The married couple who had just moved into the other side of the duplex had found her on the front lawn as they emerged to go for Sunday brunch. She had not seen them yet, so she had not been able to ask how they had saved her. She had been certain it was impossible to save someone who would cut lengthwise rather than across. But they had saved her, and she sat up in the hospital bed, and the intern tried to be supportive. "Everybody wants to get away from the world," he said. "Whether it's dope or booze or religion or television or quick sex or trashy novels, everybody wants to run away. We all want to be entertained all the time, and when it doesn't work, when none of it is enough, we try to kill ourselves to escape." She didn't think he understood just how lonely she was. "The real world is terrific," the young intern said. "I promise you, Anne-Marie, it's wonderful. People are always complaining, 'Oh, I need to get away. I need to relax. I don't want to think about it.' If they turn on the tube and it's some program about current events, they rush to change the channel to get some silly rerun of a sitcom. We spend 90% of our lives escaping. If you really, truly, completely deal with the real world, it's fascinating." She asked him to go away. She said she wanted to sleep, to get away from it all. So he left, but she didn't sleep. She started to turn on the television set high on the wall across from her bed, but a flicker of movement out of the corner of her eye claimed her attention. Out there in the sky, turning in tight maneuvers, a Sopwith camel was having a dogfight with a large green and gray pterodactyl. She knew it was really happening out there because from the angle at which she lay, she could see other windows in the wing of the hospital to her right, and there were people leaning out and pointing at the sky. For a long time she watched the marvelous ballet of wood and fabric airplane and Cretaceous flying reptile. She was waiting on the sidewalk outside the recording company for the married executive to pick her up for their date. He had called it their illegal tryst, and she had not liked the way his face pulled up on one side when he smiled like that, but she had been empty of plans for that night, and it was something to do not to be alone. The married executive had promised her dinner and a movie. They were going to see a very popular space war movie that everyone said was the return of entertainment. It was something to do. As she stood there at the curb, a 1941 Packard pulled up and a woman rolled down the window. It was a green Packard, highly polished, as though someone who loved it had waxed it endlessly. "Anne Marie," the woman called from the car. She walked over. It was her mother. Her father was driving. The scent of pipe tobacco came from inside the car. "We thought we might have a picnic, like the old times, just the three of us," her mother said. "Would you like to come along?" She began to cry, even as she nodded and her mother reached back to unlock the rear door. She got inside and sat very quietly beside the picnic basket. The Packard thrummed to life and pulled away. Anne Marie Stebner's mother and father had been dead for 11 years. It was a wonderful picnic. Sailing the catamaran through the reefs of sapphire rocks, she made for the island. The wind smelled of freshly mowed grass and carried with it the faint tinkling of wind chimes. "If it gets too lonely out here," she said aloud, "perhaps I'll start a fast food franchise, something with Lebanese food, maybe." As she spoke, a group of golden-tanned men and women emerged from behind a dune on the island and waved at her, waved her in through the precious reefs. "Or I can always rent a television set somewhere," she said, smiling broadly. Several of the golden people produced oddly shaped musical instruments and began playing Hoagie Carmichael's Skylark. It had always been her favorite tune. She tacked against the wind and headed into the island. Reality was fighting back. If the real world was too horrible for the lives it served, then the real world would alter itself. Anne Marie Stebner beached the catamaran and ran up the sand toward the Golden Island dwellers. "Hi," she called to them. "I've always wanted to live in a place like this. I just didn't know where to go to find it. What's happening around here?" So they told her, and she could not, in her wildest dreams, have believed anything could be that terrifically interesting. But it was, there in the real world. You've been listening to pre-1990s speculative fiction readings with a highlight on science fiction by Darrell T. Smith II. Please consider clicking the donation link in the description box. Thank you so much for your time and your imagination.